What if I told you that long before Egypt, Sumer, or any empire we learn about in school, an entire global civilization flourished along coastlines that are now hundreds of meters underwater, then was quietly written out of our history? What if the ruins, the myths, and the anomalies we dismiss today are the last fingerprints of a world humanity was never meant to remember? Beneath the surface of our familiar world, there is another landscape, not of sand and forest and cities, but of drowned valleys, forgotten shorelines, and ruins that should not exist. For decades, divers have whispered about strange structures on the seabed. Terraces that look like stepped pyramids, stone avenues that vanish into the abyss, walls too straight and too precise to be just rocks. These discoveries rarely make headlines. They appear in obscure journals, in fringe conferences, in stories told late at night among researchers and explorers. Each one, on its own, is easy to dismiss. Together, they point to something else. During the last ice age, sea levels were up to 120 meters lower. Entire continents of habitable land, now gone, once circled our planet. And for a brief moment in time, those drowned coastlines may have been home to a civilization far older and far more advanced than we dare to admit. According to our textbooks, civilization began roughly 6,000 years ago, with the rise of writing, cities, and centralized states in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China. Before that, we imagine humanity as scattered bands of hunter-gatherers, struggling for survival. But the Earth itself tells a more complicated story. Around 12,000 years ago, the planet emerged from a period of violent climate chaos. Ice sheets melted with shocking speed. Sea levels rose, sometimes by meters within a few generations. Entire coastal regions, where early humans would naturally have settled, were swallowed by the sea. If any complex culture had developed along those Ice Age shores, almost all of their cities, ports, and temples would now lie under hundreds of billions of tons of water, cracked, eroded, and buried in sediment. On land, we find hints that something older was already at work. Enormous megaliths erected with an engineering sophistication that even today would be challenging. Astronomical alignments so precise they track the rising of stars thousands of years in the past. Mythologies that speak again and again of a time before the flood, when gods taught humanity architecture, astronomy, and law. Mainstream historians interpret these as symbolic stories, the poetic memory of ancient natural disasters. But some researchers argue that myths from Sumer, India, Mesoamerica, and the Mediterranean are not metaphors at all. They are testimonies, remembering a real world that drowned. Far from shorelines, on continental shelves now deep underwater, sonar and sub-bottom scans have revealed patterns that do not look natural. Rectilinear grids, terraced formations, and what appear to be stepped platforms rising from the bedrock. Most of these findings are quietly classified as unusual geological features. Expeditions are expensive, funding is limited, and the burden of proof is immense. But occasionally, images leak, and they raise unsettling questions. We were told not to draw conclusions, but when you see a grid of right angles stretching for kilometers at a consistent depth, you start to wonder who lived there and why their story isn't being told. Then there are the myths themselves. Cultures separated by oceans speak of a time when a great maritime people navigated the world, trading knowledge, seeding cities, and building monuments in stone. They describe a sudden, catastrophic event. Fire from the sky, rising seas, endless rain, and a sunless cold. After that, the first civilization was gone. Geological evidence supports a period of intense chaos around this time. Yet in many academic circles, the idea of an organized, seafaring proto-civilization remains taboo, too close, some say, to myth and fantasy. Careers have been derailed for asking the wrong questions. Is this skepticism simply careful science? Or has the narrative of human history become so rigid that any deviation must be ignored, ridiculed, or erased? Imagine for a moment that the story is true, not exactly as told in legend, but in its essence. Along the great Ice Age coastlines lived a maritime civilization. Not a spacefaring super-empire, but a culture capable of stone architecture, ocean navigation, and long-distance trade. They settled where land met sea, on river deltas, continental shelves, and island chains. They mapped the stars to navigate, tracked long climate cycles, and recorded their knowledge in durable stone, wood, and probably materials we no longer recognize. Then the world changed. A series of abrupt warming pulses and meltwater floods sent sea levels surging. In the span of a few centuries, the coastlines that had been humanity's heartland were swallowed. Their cities became reefs. Their temples were crushed by sediment. Their libraries dissolved in salt water and time. Survivors fled inland, carrying fragments of memory, stories of the world before the waters, knowledge of measurement, masonry, and the cycles of the sky. They became the culture heroes of later myths, the ones who arrived from the sea to teach agriculture, architecture, and law. Over thousands of years, their names twisted into gods, demigods, and legends. If this is even partially true, then what we call the birth of civilization might actually be its rebirth, a second attempt, built on the dim, painful memory of a prior world lost to the ocean. And if that is the case, It forces us to ask, why has this possibility been resisted so fiercely? Is it simply because hard evidence lies in inaccessible depths? Or because acknowledging a forgotten chapter of human history would mean admitting how fragile and how incomplete our story really is? Somewhere, beneath silt and coral and darkness, there may still be stones that remember the hands that placed them. The ocean keeps its secrets well. But piece by piece, scan by scan, myth by myth, a picture is emerging of a civilization history never recorded or quietly chose to forget. If we are willing to look beyond the limits of the textbook page, to listen to the echoes in our oldest stories and the shapes hidden beneath the waves, we may yet uncover the world that came before our own. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring the chapters of human history that the oceans, and perhaps our own institutions, have tried to erase.